ask you some questions about, like the book and, different things like that. So why don't we go ahead and just start kind of off with, what do you do, first of all, and what kind of made you want to be an author and start writing about topics like this?
Okay. All right, so are we ready to go now?
Yeah, go ahead, whenever you're ready.
Okay. I work for Florida State. I'm the director of operations for our men and women's golf team. And I wrote my first book, or I finished my first book when my second child was born. So like my brother had gone to Iraq, and my promise to him was when he was gone, I would finish the book. So that was a long time ago. And then, that I didn't really do anything after that because we had 2 children and it was kind of crazy. But I always wanted to continue to write. And so a friend of mine told me about National Novel Writing Month, which is in November of every year.
Oh, wow.
And so you basically set a goal to write 50,000 words in a month.
Wow.
So, yeah. So the first, actually, every book I've written has come in November. So I wrote my first one. I guess it was 2012, and then we published it in 2014. And I'm trying to think of when I met Evan, or actually I met Zach first, Zach and Kieran. I guess it was 2004. Yeah, it was right after I first published that first book. So, I heard their story about Play for Rafe at the time, and was just super intrigued about just their ability at such a young age to set a goal and to see something through, and really triumph over that tragic event. And since I write romance novels, I proposed to them, hey, can I use part of your story? And then, we'll sell it and, split the profits. So
that's nice. So I didn't realize, because I read Bliss, which we'll talk about what the book's about in a second, but so you went from like romance novels and things like that to kind of, doing, talking about sudden cardiac arrest and stuff like that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I had my last child, I had an abnormal, I guess it was an abnormal x-ray or whatever. And then they had me do a stress test, and I had a really abnormal stress test. So they thought I might have ARVD.
Oh, wow.
So, we did the whole cardiac MRI and everything. So that was the only reason I even knew what sudden cardiac arrest was, is because I'd gone through that. But their story was just ridiculously inspiring. I was, I've been in my early 20s, and I know I was not that motivated to follow anything through for that long. And all the bumps they've hit and all the obstacles they've come across, and they continue to just really work for this. And it's just really, really cool. And I'm raising 3 boys. And so I love that, I have these guys that are role models for them that have done just amazing things. So.
Absolutely. I mean, they are some pretty hardworking guys.
Yeah.
They're still going out there. So talk a little bit about Bliss then. I mean, talk about how you came up with the storyline. Just picking your brain now about what it's like to be an author, how'd you do the whole thing?
So the part of it, I think, is the National Novel Writing Month thing, where you have to write words. So you kind of let yourself, I kind of just let the story go. I notice when I don't write during that time, I'm a lot more prone to edit and to question myself. There's just not that pressure to kind of get this word count done. So I emailed with a bunch of, so Zane and Zach and Evan, of course, and Kieran, a little bit Ian. So I had their, they gave me their stories, and I made this little notebook of all their stuff. And then I just kind of started writing. And I remember the first time, like my first prologue that I wrote, I gave it to my husband to read and he was kind of like, eh.
So at least you can depend on him for, constructive criticism, I guess.
Yeah. So, and then, one of the things that I think struck me was, when they were all talking about, sort of that game where they were going to, I think it was right after Rafe, against Melbourne, and how badly they wanted to win. And they talked about this Disney moment, right? Where you win the big game and you go on a state. And, when you're around sports, right? Which I've been for the last 20 years, those moments, although they're captured in film so often, that they're so rare, right?
Yeah, right.
So I think really nailing the prologue for me was one of the that was really big for me. I wanted to find a way to express their shock, and then that sort of spirit of, okay, we're gonna kick this thing's ass, right? Like this thing has totally devastated us. But instead of just kind of living with that grief, and they started learning about it, and just so it was, I really, really wanted that to come across in the story. So that was something that I was working really hard to do in those first couple of pages. And then the rest of the story, I had some feedback I had some people from the organization, or people that have been involved, reading it too. And one of the major contributions from that was the name of Gabe. Because at first I think I named him Henry or something, and someone was like, well, there's 3 archangels, and wouldn't it be cool if you had, there's Raphael and Michael and Gabriel, and if you could use Gabriel as one of the names. So that's how the name came about. Was what that was me. Really that cool. Was someone else suggesting that. And then the other thing, which I think is a little bit different, was sort of the points of view that were.
It was really.
And again, that was just some different things that they told me, and then just trying to fictionalize it, but also kind of get the feelings across. A couple of times I've said to people that I wish I had any confidence in the ability to write a true story, like A Blind Side, something like someone took this story and this true story and made it really work for them. And I wasn't that confident in my skill to do that. So that's why I had to go the fiction route. But I wanted to make sure that I sort of took everybody's threads and kind of put them all together.
Absolutely. So why don't you talk about then, what the storyline is? I mean, again, I read it, so I know, but for everybody who didn't read it, how does it kind of work? I mean, what is the storyline really for it?
Okay. Wow. So I should have been prepped for this one.
I know.
It's hard to put it in to do it.
I know it is hard.
This should be the elevator pitch, right? I should have this all set. Okay. It opens with the death of Gabe, and you sort of get it from 2 perspectives. One is one of his best friends, JC, and I guess he's 16 at the time, and then Gabe's older sister, Lena, who's in her early 20s, and is sort of in this personal crisis at the time anyway. And then, her baby brother dies, and that's kind of this sort of cataclysmic event for her. So to the point where she doesn't want anything to do with soccer or any kind of reminder. So she doesn't come home. She's kind of taking herself out of the whole situation. So that's sort of the prologue. And then there's this secret that Gabe knows, and that he's told to JC. And so at the funeral, there's this moment between Lena and JC of sort of this understanding that they were two really important people to Gabe. So that was, and that kind of comes up later in the book, but, and then it picks up years later, and Lena has a son, and she shares custody with the boy's father, but there's this really kind of weird family dynamic between that I think is one of the biggest questions people ask me about, actually, when they ask about the book. And her son wants to play soccer, and so the first chapter of the book is her going to pick him up, even though she's sworn she doesn't want to be involved. And as she's there, she immediately is like just confronted with these feelings about her brother, and turns out that JC is actually Nick's coach. And so the story progresses about how they she's coming to terms with her brother's death, which she never did. And whereas all of his friends really, instead of sort of just forgetting about him and going on and living their like adolescent life, right, they turn this into this this quest to knock out sudden cardiac arrest. So and then of course Lena and JC end up becoming a thing.
Of course, because they have to.
Right, of course. But I think it's just really interesting to deal with grief. I recently lost my dad, and that was.
I'm sorry.
No, thank you. But I think if I had written the story after that, maybe some of the grief stuff would have been a little bit different. But I do think it's a way you kind of see how different people approach their grief, and how that sort of kind of determines where they're at emotionally. So I think that's a major part of it. And some of the feedback I've gotten about that book is just the process of grieving.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, you did a great job with it. I mean, having lost people before, I mean, everyone does deal with it extremely differently. And I'm sure even when you were talking, like, Evan, Zane, Kieran, all of them had different perspectives on it too when it came to race, back in Cocoa Beach. So I do think you did a really good job with that portion of it too.
I will say one of the coolest things I did was, so my son Nico was being coached by Kieran and Ian first, and then Ian left, and Kieran and Zach were coaching him. So he had this connection with these guys. So we actually he and I went to the December to Remember event. So we did the block party on Friday night, and then we did like the I think this format was a little different then. There was the alumni game, and then the next day was the Brevard game. So the other thing I really wanted to nail in the book was sort of that feeling around the soccer game, just being there, and the sort of like the gathering at the end of the game, and they it was really cool. They made a big deal about my son being there, and so I think that was, it was just one of those events that was sort of one of those. It was super cathartic. And so that was the other thing I really wanted to sort of nail in the book, was that how that event sort of helped propel Lena to kind of deal with her grief, and at least acknowledge that she was still grieving and that she had never really dealt with it. So, but I also think the book does a lot about friendships as you get older, and still like you make when you're younger.
No, absolutely. And I think that definitely you nailed it, especially when you're young. You have no idea how to grieve those types of situations. So I think a lot of people do it differently. And going past friendships, as you were saying, I mean, they end up being a couple and everything. And of course, you being, a romance writer, you have to throw that in there here and there. So No, that's awesome. No, I think, if people haven't read it, definitely need to go get Bliss. It's an amazing book. I do want to ask you real quick, though, about Love is Contagious. We were kind of talking about that, too. Why don't you go ahead and talk about what that project's been like?
Yeah, actually, that was something I sort of fell into. Like, I can take zero credit for it. I'm in an author sort of an author page on Facebook, and Julie Salmon was like, hey, I really like to do this anthology for COVID relief. She's a healthcare worker. So, does anybody want to contribute? And I was like, sure. I was probably one of the best things that I've ever done. Because I think I'm not really good at self-promotion, and I haven't really, social media is not really my friend. I try really hard, but it's just, I haven't quite made the jump. And these women are, they're phenomenal. Like so that was like on a Tuesday. By Friday, they had a name, they had a blurb, they had like graphics, they had a timeline. It was unbelievable. I felt like I was just riding their coattails. But it's been great. And I think the response has been really good. And all the proceeds are going to, between two different charities. So, it was just, I just kind of lucked into that one, but it was a really great experience. So that's another one. It's not a physical book because there's 21 stories in it. So it's only an ebook. But it's available at all vendors. So
I was going to ask you if you want to go ahead and plug, where people can find it. Both Bliss and this. Why don't you go ahead and tell people where you can find Bliss, and then also, what Love is Contagious.
Yeah. Bliss is actually only available through Amazon right now because it's in Kindle Unlimited too. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it. So it's only available there, and I'll probably put it back on all platforms soon. And then Love is Contagious is everywhere. It's on any platform that you want digitally. But you can also order a physical book for Bliss. So
perfect. So our last question for you that we've been asking everybody that have been partaking in these videos is, we like to ask people, who do you play for? Because part of the reason we're doing this, as you mentioned, is like Evan, Zane, and them. Theirs is Rafe, and it's just your reason to why, and you keep going and things like that. So we want to ask you, who do you play for?
So I have. I just have to say my family. I've got 4 children who are phenomenal, and then just a really good supporting cast around me. My brothers, my sister, my parents, and so that's family for me.
Yeah. Me too. I love it. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for doing this. Again, video is on Facebook now. If you want to share it, do whatever. But other than that, pretty easy conversation, huh?
It was great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you officially.
Finally,
We'll make sure we'll get the links up for your books on there too.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Talk to you later.